Hello, I'm Dr. Gloria Horsley.
And I'm her daughter, Dr. Heidi Horsley.
Heidi and I want to welcome you to Open to Hope Conversations, the podcast.
We believe that the greatest gift you can give yourself after a loss is hope, using this moment to connect with others who have not only survived but thrived.
So let's get started. Welcome to the Open to Hope show. I'm your host, Dr. Gloria Horsley, with my daughter and co-host,
Dr. Heidi Horsley.
Well, Heidi, we've got a great guest on, and we're going to be talking to widows about some important information and about practical advice, which I think we all need. But before we get started and before we introduce our guest, I want to remind you all that my fiance and I have our new book out, Open to Love, The Secrets of Senior Dating. Surgeon General reported that loneliness is one of the big problems in America today. And Frank and I found each other. I was lonely after losing my spouse of 60 years, and Frank and I happened to meet online, and he's been a therapist for 40 years, as have I, and we give you some of our advice about dating. 100% of the proceeds for the book go to the Open Hope Foundation with the mission of helping people find hope after loss. Well, Heidi, I'm excited about our guest. Would you like to introduce her? She's one of our Open to Hope writers.
Yes, she is, Mom. And like you said, you and Kim have a lot in common. She is a widow. Her name is Kim Murray, and we are going to be talking with her today about the practical advice for widows. So Kim's husband died of terminal brain cancer in 2014. She is the co-founder of the Widow Squad, and she is the co-host of Widow Squad podcast. She has made it her mission to share the no BS version of widowhood using her candid and unflinchingly honest approach. So welcome to our podcast, Kim.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very honored to be here with you today. Thank you.
Great having you on. Let's talk about some of practical advice for widows. I know when I was widowed, wow. I mean, it is so huge. You're so emotionally thrown, and then you've got all these practical things.
It's something you can't understand. It's like anything else. If you don't go through it, you can't really understand what it's like. But the enormity of dealing with the practical things or the business side of death is something people cannot comprehend. How much there is to do after your spouse dies. And so we don't really think about that because we don't expect, or we know death is inevitable for everybody, but you just really don't expect it to happen to you. So then I was young. I was only 44 and my husband died. So you definitely don't expect it to happen that young. But just the enormity of that and the finality of death, and you're grieving, and this huge gaping hole in your heart and your family and your life. And then you have to do everything else that you're supposed to do after your spouse dies, like manage your accounts and handle your finances and deal with taxes and insurance and all of that stuff. So when I
think it takes about a month before you suddenly say, oh my gosh, I don't know how to do this.
I don't know how to do it. I don't know what to do.
I can't remember the name of my bank. I can't remember the name of my insurance company. How would I remember passwords?
Well, I'm thinking about all the passwords too. Some of them, I'm married and I don't know all my husband's passwords just because I haven't even thought about asking him.
You don't think about asking because it's not something that you would be anticipating happening, right? But this is what we try to counsel people on. Even when you're widowed, even after your spouse dies, especially if you have children, you still need to prepare that information for your kids, because at some point they're going to need to know this information to help settle your estate or whatever, documents that you have. So it's not something that you really think about until it happens to you. So when you're grieving and you're overwhelmed and your co-partner, your co-parent, your everything is gone, it's incredibly overwhelming. It's hard.
So Kim, what are the things you wish you had thought about?
Well, here's the interesting thing. So I was part of the financial half of my marriage. It wasn't like my husband dealt with finances and I was in the dark or anything. I knew all about our finances. I was kind of the technical person in our marriage, so I knew what the passwords and all the stuff was on the computer. So we were partners pretty much in every sense. And so I wasn't in the dark about anything, but even knowing what I knew, it was still incredibly difficult for me to process all of that information after he died, and to change accounts and to contact insurance agents or estate attorneys and all those things you have to do. So even knowing what I knew, it was extremely difficult for me. So I was, in the beginning of my widowhood, I just kept taking notes, and I had a file folder, like a manila file folder, and I just kept putting information and notes in there, thinking at some point, someday, I'm going to help other widows do this because this is insane. I didn't know what that meant or how I was going to do it. I just kept filing notes and, pieces of scrap paper that I had all over my desk, because I had piles of paperwork on my desk, like most people, like most widows do. Where do I start? What do I do? How do I handle it? Do I need help handling it? These are never ending questions.
I'll have to tell you what my husband did. We happened to have interviewed a woman who produced a book, like, 3 years ago, because she handled her sister's estate, and she didn't want it to happen to other people. It was just general estate planning. My husband went in, because he had health issues, and did everything the book said.
Fantastic.
But it wasn't as clear as yours. He would have loved your step by step. It was more obscured, more veiled. He didn't, but he went in and organized everything, and he always felt like it's important to have a team. And he also always wanted me to know the finances, always.
Which is important for anybody to know. It's really not something that you should be, putting your head in the sand about or digging your head in, because it's something. Agree. Yeah, you really need to know. You don't have to be a financial analyst or a CPA or anything, but you still need to have a general idea. A widow may have an issue where they can't afford their mortgage now, or their house is getting foreclosed on, or they have to move for logistical reasons because their kids are in a different school and now they can't transport them. Whatever the case may be, there's all kinds of different scenarios when you're widowed. So the timing, it is 100% on what matters to you and what's helpful to you. I didn't have to move. I didn't want to move, and I didn't have to move. I thought about it, because you think about crazy things when you're widowed, because you think you're going to I thought I was going to sell my house and take my kids on a tour across country and homeschool them in an RV, which is ridiculous. And I'm glad I didn't do that. But those were some of the thoughts in my head. I didn't have to move. So I stayed put. My kids stayed put. Sometimes that isn't the case for some widows. And so it just depends on if you need to make decisions right away. The common knowledge is like, don't make any big decisions in the first year. Sometimes you don't have a choice.
I've been a counselor, a therapist in marriage and family for over 40 years. And we always said, don't do anything the first year. I did a lot the first year.
She broke all her rules.
You have to sometimes. Yeah. I mean, but it's whatever works best for you.
We had a place that we went to, a summer place that we went to that was really my husband and I together, and he loved it more than I did. And I've never been back. My kids went down and went through it, and I sold it. And you know what? I don't regret it. It's been, I'm going on to 4 years, and I do not regret doing that.
Kim, you also had children. How old were they?
They were 8 and 10 when my husband died. And so my husband he was self-employed. He had his own business. And so I took over running his business after he died. Actually, I took over running it the year he got sick, because we knew he was going to die. He had terminal cancer. So he said, you need to take over my business. And
how long was he sick for, from diagnosis to death? Only
year.
1 year? That's really traumatic.
Right. So we knew
that was very quick.
Yeah, we knew that was coming. So I thought, okay, well, I'll take over running part of his business until he's gone, and then I'll figure out what else to do. But as it turned out, it was a very flexible schedule for me. So I was able to be home with my kids when I needed to be, go to all the sporting events, all the school functions. So I ran that business for 8 years after he died. I sold it in 2022, and my youngest was 16 or 17 at that point. But
that's interesting.
Yeah, I didn't have a choice at that time.
What was the most difficult thing about raising children as a single parent now?
Just that, just the questions, the constant second guessing about what you're doing and how you're doing it, and are they going to be okay? So when you are a parent, it's hard, right? Everybody who has kids who is a parent knows it's difficult to raise children anyway, but because there are no rules. And so, but when you're by yourself, now you had a co-parent, now he or she is gone. That confusion, that intensity just magnifies by about 1 trillion. So, my biggest thing was, am I doing the right thing? Am I making the right decisions? I know now, looking back, that I didn't need to second guess myself as much as I did, because I was making good decisions, and I was, in the best interest of my kids. But there's just, when you're alone now,
Right.
you're just constantly, I mean, I was constantly second guessing what I was
Because
doing.
you were used to going to your husband and saying, hey, my child wants to do this. These are my thoughts. What are your thoughts? You didn't have anybody to bounce that off of that knew your kids as well as
No,
you did.
no.
I'm interested in the words alone. Now that I am alone, and now that I am lonely, and I'm kind of thinking maybe that's a little bit of the difference between younger and older widows. Older widows are lonely. They're
Mm-hmm.
in the house alone, but younger widows who have kids are alone.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a
I like that distinction.
It's a valid distinction, because for me, and we talk to a lot of older widows too, in our membership, we have a lot of older widows that either didn't have children or their children are grown. They're incredibly lonely. I didn't know what that felt like because I was never I never had a minute to myself.
Exactly. I would think you'd be overwhelmed at times being now
Overwhelmed.
the single parent that's parenting your children.
Yeah, so there's the solo part of it, and then it's just doing everything, making every decision. I had two children, so getting them to the places they needed to be. I couldn't be in two places at one time. So all that stuff. And I just never.
You were working full time to hold down the financial for it.
I was working too.
You're
Exactly.
very busy. With the older widows, what have you seen with them that you see as different?
So that's the difference, is that they're lonely because there's nobody in their house anymore. I had humans in my home. I had relationship. We were, living together, my children and I in my house. So I was never alone, where it was, a lot of times the older widows will hate the weekends because they're so long and so quiet. And again, I didn't know what that was like because I didn't have quietness in my house. I had chaos in my house.
What are your thoughts? I'm thinking about this, about women who are widowed. They do not get into a relationship and then their kids leave home. I wonder, are you seeing anything where they're struggling now with a different issue of loneliness?
Sure. And the thing is, we try to go through a lot of, we do a lot of activities, and we do a lot of Zoom meetings and a lot of counseling, and just try to differentiate between the physicalness of being alone and the feeling of loneliness. Cause we know that loneliness is a feeling. It's not a fact, right? It's just something, it's in a response to an emotion in you. So that's what we try to explain to them. Like you can feel lonely. That's a legitimate feeling, but it doesn't mean that you are in this horrible space forever and ever because you're feeling lonely today. You can change that feeling. You can still be alone and not re-partnered. Some people do not want to get remarried. They don't want to date. That's fine. But when they're getting, I don't want to say depressed, but when they're feeling, those feelings of loneliness and thinking that this is the way it's going to be forever and it's horrible and they don't have a bright future, that's when we kind of step in and say, but that's a feeling. So the loneliness is a feeling, and you can change your perspective about it at any time, when you want to. You don't have to be repartnered to do that. You can still lead a fulfilling life without being repartnered.
Right.
So
and figure out how to create a new community even.
Correct.
Which I know Soaring Spirits does.
Yeah, Soaring Spirits does.
You're involved with that.
Yes. And so that's why we wanted to start the membership. The Widow Squad membership was because, again, like, you had said, loneliness is the number one feeling that widows say is the hardest for them. And we hear the exact same thing. So we were like, okay, well, let's start a community then. And
Oh, I love this.
Right. So you can come and join us, and we can talk about all the issues, because even though we're older or younger, had children or didn't have children, there are still some things that we all experience. The Widow Squad membership.
The Widow Squad membership, and you just go to widowsquad.com.
Yep.
I love this.
What do you see as the number one issues that stop women from moving forward?
Their thoughts. Thinking in absolutes. I'll never, I'll always. We talk about this all the time. Let's not use always and never, because things change, not only minute to minute, day by day, hour to hour, year by year, month to month, right? Things change. So I think our thoughts about, I was in that position when I was first widowed. I was 44 years old. I thought I drew the short straw. I am going to be alone forever. I'm going to be the cat lady with the, gnome statues in my front yard and all the things, right? Like I'm just going to be alone forever. Because it hurts so bad and it's so
Mhm.
awful that you really, at least in the beginning, don't have a frame of reference to understand that it can get better. You can be okay. Time passes. Time doesn't heal all wounds, but it allows that time to pass where you can look back and say, okay, I actually did do something. I actually am feeling better. I actually did,
Mhm.
start to see my friends again or start to go out and be in, the public again. You can't
Well,
do that
and
when you're
Kim, I would also think when you said I drew the short end of the stick, you're in your 40s looking around at your friends, their husbands aren't dying in a
no,
year of brain cancer, or
no,
they're still alive, and you're probably thinking, wait a minute, what is going on here? Because
exactly.
you're
It's
by
very
yourself in
confusing.
this place in a
Mhm.
lot of ways.
Yeah, it's very
Well,
confusing and nobody understands it. And I had people say to me, the bank teller, well, you don't look like a widow. What does a widow look like? I mean, the average age of a widow is 59. And I don't think people understand that
Wow,
is a young age. I mean,
I didn't know
44 was,
that.
yeah, that's the average age. So we think of widows as in their 80s, they've been married
Hmm.
for 60 years, their kids are grown, whatever. Was not my experience. So that made
Hmm.
it more difficult because I didn't know at that time anybody who was like me. I didn't know
Right.
anybody who had young kids and was now alone. You can reinvent yourself, and when you're first widowed and all that confusion's coming across and you don't know what to do and how to do it, and that's one of the reasons why I created the Ultimate Survival Guide for Widows. That's the online course that I created to help them get through those soul crushing tasks, post-death tasks, but at
Hmm.
least have the information and make it easy so that they can feel that confidence. They can feel like I can actually do this. They don't have to abdicate all of their responsibility because they don't know anything. They could do it and go through step-by-step processes
Hmm.
like what I show.
I love that you call it soul crushing because it's not great calling up and saying, I have to close this account because
No.
my husband just died.
Well, the crazy
Or
thing is when you get people on the phone and you're telling them your spouse died, and then they'll say they're not even listening to you.
yeah,
So then
exactly.
they want to speak to the spouse, and you're like, I just told you
He
he
died.
died. Like you have to
Yeah.
really be very specific with some of these people that don't even care. They're not even listening to what you're saying. So you say it over and over and over again.
Over, and then somebody calls you and says, could I speak to Dr. Philip Horsley about this account? And I say, Philip Horsley has passed away,
Yeah.
I am his wife, blah, 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 blah.
Or you get mail for a long
Oh, you get
time.
mail.
You get
Yeah.
mail, you get the junk mail. I mean, in the Ultimate Survival Guide, there's a section on how to get your spouse's name off the direct marketing list. So you're not getting all
Wow.
those, direct marketing mail. It
Great.
has all kinds of information on what to do with your accounts and how to handle taxes and insurance. And really, I mean, even closing credit card accounts, for
Oh, yeah.
example.
Oh, that's big. Closing credit cards accounts.
Credit card accounts, you have to make sure that you
Just
don't have
barely closed ours. After going on to 4 years, there's some things that you just don't get around to
you don't
doing.
get around to doing, but you
You
should,
just-
because that could be an identity theft issue, right? You want to get those
Hmm.
things done and closed, but make
That's a
sure
good
that you
point,
don't
Kim.
have points on your credit card. What if you have travel points? What if you have cash back points? Don't cancel them until you figure out that this is all in the Ultimate Survival Guide. I've
Combining
gone
your airline tickets for
all
frequent
of that.
flyers, and American wouldn't combine them. They wouldn't give it to me. United did. You're dealing with people telling you, no, we won't do that. Yes, we will do that.
Yeah. Ultimate Survival Guide started out as a PDF, but I switched it to an online course because I have a lot of hyperlinks in it and a lot of things you can download like templates and worksheets and checklists. So it didn't really lend itself well to a book or a PDF. But the book itself was 258 pages or something like that
Wow.
if you were to print it. And at one point when I was done creating it, I had to stop myself from adding any more. Honestly, you guys, I could have added more. I stopped myself from adding more. And I was like, this is already kind of overwhelming, but this is the basics that I want to at least cover and help widows with. But I could have added more. Go to
And for widows.
widowsquad.com
Yep.
/survival. And that gives you all the information about the Ultimate Survival Guide for Widows.
Now, what's really cool is Kim will hold your hand. I mean, you pay for it. It's,
Yeah.
is it?
It's $147. I have
Oh,
videos
it's
in
worth
there.
every cent of it. She's gonna hold your hand step by step. If you don't want to do, you only go as fast as you.
Exactly. It's self-paced. You can handle what you can handle.
And for older women, if you have daughters like I do that are always willing to come in and hold my hand, they could even go through, or a son
Absolutely.
or a son-in-law or somebody, they can step you through the process. But she gives it step by step. That's the beauty of it. I thought it was extremely
That's
impressive.
great.
Because you can go as fast or as slow as you want to. If you want to skip around, if there are
Mhm.
things you need to address immediately, you can go there and she will tell you how to address that immediately. You know, you may have to deal with Social Security.
Mhm.
You have to deal with immediately. She will step you through and help you to do that, which is really important. I mean, you know, it takes a team. Even if you're on your own,
Mhm.
you're going to find out you're going to be teaming with other people.
Absolutely. And you can do it if you don't want to, like you said, Gloria. I mean, you can obviously have somebody help you, which I've suggested that many times. Have your neighbor help you, your sister, your child, or your kids, adult children, because it is overwhelming. But then there's people like me. I like lists. I like checklists. I'm going to check it off. And then when I can see that my list has been checked off and I've completed these, whatever, how many things, I feel better. And then I feel a little bit more in control. Part of when you're newly widowed is everything feels so out of control. I needed to take back some of that control for myself, and then going through these steps and closing these accounts and handling all the, credit card cancellations and even contacting the credit bureau. There's a section in there for contacting the credit bureau to add a deceased do not issue credit flag on your deceased spouse's account. So would you know how to do that, or why you would need to do that? Of course not, because you haven't been widowed. So you need to do those things. And I tell you how to write the letter to the credit bureau. I tell you what to say. I tell you how to
Wow.
send it. I tell you all the things. But I wanted to take some of that control back because I felt like I was spinning and I was never going to stop. And I thought, okay, how can I make this better for me? So I just started making these lists, and I thought, okay, now I'm going to make it better for other widows too by just
Wow.
sharing all of this and helping them through this really, like I said, soul
Now,
crushing.
for those of you who are listening or watching who are like me, what she's saying right now makes me feel very, very anxious. So be calm, take a breath,
Yes.
get
Mhm.
somebody to help.
Mhm.
You can go, I can go as slowly as I want. And
You can.
I got to go run through all this again and see what I haven't
What
done.
did you miss? And there's not everything applies to you. My husband wasn't a veteran. The veterans benefits don't apply to me, but there's a section in there about that. My husband was
Mhm.
self-employed, so I didn't have to contact any of his previous employers about potential death benefits. That might not apply to you. So you can go at your own pace, skip around, whatever works for you or doesn't work for you. It is okay, but take that time. You have time to do these things. One thing I say is get into the Social Security office as soon as possible, obviously. If you're eligible for benefits, that's something you want to do. That's an income source. So you want to do that right away. The other things don't have to be done on a specific timeline. Within the first year is ideal, self-paced. So it's up to you to decide what works for you, what you can handle.
Hey, Kim, thank you so much for everything you're doing and have done and the work you've done with widows.
Thank you.
So awesome.
Yes,
I-
I agree with my mom, Kim. Thank you for helping widows navigate, all the business pieces and all the tasks they have to do as they go through the grief journey
Mm,
and helping them find hope again.
Thank you. I
Now
appreciate it.
tell us how best to find you.
thewidowsquad.com is the best place. You can find our membership. You can find our programs. We have other resources for widows other than the Ultimate Survival Guide. We're constantly adding new resources and ways to make widows' lives easier.
All right. Well, Kim, thank you again for being on the show today. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
And Heidi and I want to remind you, as always, if you've lost hope, please lean on ours until you find your own, and God bless.
I'm Dr. Heidi Horsley. You have been listening to Open to Hope, the podcast. You can follow Open to Hope on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. To learn more, visit us at opentohope.com and go to Apple Podcasts to subscribe.
I'm Dr. Gloria Horsley. Join us again next week for another Open to Hope conversation, where we invite you to lean on our hope until you find your own.